Patrycja Radła-Będziewska, good evening. That's a program in which we show the events for what they are, black and white, czarno na białym. No word on the assassination attempt, but still explosions, at least two, but still no proof to prove that. 8 years after the Smolensk crash, Antoni Macierewicz and his experts published the report, which they called technical, the report on the causes of the crash of the presidential airplane, and today's program will show how, according to the experts of the prosecution, the actual tragedy happened. The explosions not even mentioned in a word. What's interesting, the prosecution of Ziobro does not disclose these experts' opinions of Piotr Świerczek by not disclosing the materials from the investigation, but still using his own graphics and the already known photos. Well, I'll try show, minute by minute, centimeter by centimeter, as to how, according to the experts of the prosecution, the actual crash had happened.
We are going towards the truth about the Smolensk crash. There will be a time.
This flight has long since not been coping with the political burden.
We have won.
The burden of the theses and theories, which may have a terrible impact.
The Commission has no doubts about the explosion.
Here were the explosive charges, the largest ones, those epicenters.
The explosion in central wing, above ground.
There were numbers of traces of explosives.
I think the answer is clear. It wasn't an accident, it was an assassination attempt.
Sounds much more effective than what actually the Polish prosecution managed to gather. In the documents of the investigation, there's an expert's opinion which, based on the proof, actually excludes a bomb attack.
The prosecution ordered an additional expert opinion to a team of experts, and they issued this comprehensive opinion. The reasons for which the prosecution demanded this additional opinion was, first of all, complementing the evidence.
The opinion created for the military prosecutor's office was complemented last year, when the head of the prosecution was Zbigniew Ziobro. The opinion is brought down to this one, created animation.
60, 50, 40, 30, 20.
This tragedy was investigated by a group of over 20 experts, military or former pilots of Tu-154, specialists on the creation of the airplane, on airplane technology and aerodynamics. There is no doubt that the low-flying airplane actually lost part of its wings after it crashed into a bird tree. No explosion, no bomb.
The wing.
The experts in over 700 pages describe how the airplane was being damaged, including the wing, 856 meters, starting from the airfield, 63 meters left of the runway. The airplane, according to the flight legislators, was a little bit of 6 meters above the ground, and it hits a tree. The tree standing on Nikolai Budin's land, a doctor of the paramedic service. Bodin was then on his land. The strength of the force of the Tupolev flying down actually had him flying flat on his back.
I saw that very well. It was flying from there. It was cutting these bushes, and that went overhead. And it had two wings. With one wing, it hit this tree and actually cut the tree. Then it went up a bit and it fell beyond the road, and the wing fell off beyond the road.
The first ones to meet the trees are the saw slots, the elements with which the wing attacks the early mass of the slots during the landings are let out from the wing and bow down at the degree of 22 degrees. The situation of the slots influences the way how they are bent and then ripped off the construction. The tree is the place where the second section and the third section of the slots begins. In order for it to be more readable, we take away all the smaller branches of the tree. This particular fragment of the slots gets torn in three parts. The most damaged fragment was investigated thanks to a rubber gasket which separates the slots. This particular fragment was ripped off yet another characteristic part of the slot with an external lead. And this particular one is ripped off of the fragment with a broken mechanism screw. All these elements were found in this particular place in a ditch found behind the tree alongside the land of Nikolai Budin. This is the most damaged part, the identified thanks to the aforementioned gasket separating the sections of the slots. This is the fragment with the screw-filled mechanism of slots outlet, and that is a fragment with an external lead. Characteristically bent upwards by the pressing tree. In here, described in the photos of the Polish police, according to investigators, these elements were found next to the tree and next to Mr. Budin's land.
This end was torn away due to the explosion.
But Wiesław Jenda, the expert of Antoni Macierewicz's subcommission, putting forward his thesis of explosions, says something entirely different.
Small explosions to destroy the slot.
He speaks on a very friendly TV.
It was found 250 meters from the tree. It never touched that birch.
Let's come back to our visualization of the expert's opinion. Let's remind you, our graphic only attempts to recreate the way what the experts thought. By describing subsequent element, we get rid of the already damaged and torn out ones. Behind the slots is the so-called nose, the thickness of 1.5 mm, and in the wing itself, the unforeseen first carrying method, that is simply a construction wall from 2.5 to 3.5 mm. At the head of the actual girder are the numbers of the actual, hence they are easy identification of this torn and ripped off element behind which the gird number 28 was. The girder was also broken into tiny parts. Everything that went through the actual holes in the girder was bent backwards. The wing is cut right to 29 gird, which is bent and broken backwards, that is, in the direction opposed to the actual flight. These fragments so far have not been described in any report, either Polish or Russian. It was only done by the prosecutor's experts. Right next to the tree, the fragment of the girder was found, easy to be identified, since having the aforementioned number 28 meaning the number of the riveted rib. Here's the view up front, from the direction head, and here, from the inside, as if from the inside of the wing. The element is clearly bent on the inside, which shows us the exterior force work in the girder. The experts say it means that the tree hit an obstacle. These fragments so far have not been described in any report, either Russian or Polish. The fragments of the girds were found in a number of places, including also the birch branches. They are quite characteristic due to the inlet openings. In the cut-off section of the wings, you can see the crashed, damaged nose. It's this characteristic harmonica part with 1.5 mm thick steel sheet. You can also see the side of the first girder with number 29 and the braking backwards as if to the middle of the construction, caused by the tree attacking the construction. All the hydraulic and fuel vents going through the openings are bent backwards, according with the direction with which the wing was cut. The moment of the hit, the machine is flying at 271 kilometers per hour, that is 75 meters per second. The impact is large enough that the bird crashes in some parts, not only 6.5 meters above the ground where the wing hit, it actually gets broken at the base, which according to the expert means that the bird gradually tilts to the left and the wing is cut at an angle not alongside the line of the flight. The bird is 47 centimeters thick, that is the ripping and bending measure of a half meter. The elements riveting the steel sheet to the wing are the actual longevity. The tree rips them off from the construction of the wing. The investigators have found quite a large number of the fragments of these within the lower and upper covering of the door. In the material you have 6 of these bars bent according to the shape of the actual birch. They were bent into half circle backwards, sideways, not downwards, which means the explosion explodes. All of them were found next to the tree during the ripping them off. The experts claim they were wrapped around the actual tree, which was certified by the expertise of the Central Forensic Laboratory. The tree crashes and rips the steel sheet of the cover. Here they are 2.5 millimeter thick. Some elements are bent inwards, others cut and pushed by the trees tend to fall outwards. You can see that in the photos of the ripped off part of it. You can see the steel sheet ripped into various directions, upwards, downwards, as well as the cables bent backwards according to the line of the cut. Here, once again, the upwards and downwards bent fuselage off the end of the tip of the wing. The tree gradually cuts the wing. At the end it rips off the fragments of the third girder, that is the vertical construction. The third girder is 3.5 millimeter thick. At the same time, it is a cover for the fuel tank, with which, in the end of the flight, we had the explosive fumes and the ends of that. This fragment was found right next, back to the birch, alongside the discovered bottles and crates. At the element you can see the tightening and sealing paste in 2 colors, black as well as light purple. The paste is rubber thick as a typical gasket for the fuel tanks used by manufacturers in renovation facilities. You can also see cables which give the electric fuel pump its power. The insulation is intact. Not a single element, including the sealing paste, has no signs of fire, no types of burning or scarring. Neither this nor the previous analyzed fragments have any dents or convex, which are quite characteristics if the fuel fumes actually exploded.
Excuse me, I will not talk to you, gentlemen.
In December, this particular thing was asked to the Deputy Commissioner of the Smolensk Commission, Kazimierz Nowacek.
If the wing fell off due to explosion, why the wingtip is intact?
I don't know.
In the wing, there is the fuel tank. If you claim that the wing was cut off due to explosion, extreme pressure, why the wingtip is intact?
Well, the pressure must have ripped it off.
Why the wingtip has not deteriorated? Because there were fuel fumes there.
One more thing. Clearly confused, he changed the topic. 2 months later, the subcommission already has an answer ready.
Our Polish pyrotechnician managed to achieve by way of experiment, the same effects. He is able to cut this wing with fuel inside or with fuel fumes, and there is no explosion of the fuel fumes in the wingtip.
Still, according to members of the subcommission, there was an explosion.
There were those explosive devices, the largest ones, the epicenters.
The explosion was also mentioned by the UK expert of the subcommission, to whom paper models of the elements were shown as assembled by the members of the commission.
No doubt whatever that there was an explosion.
The expert's opinion excludes the explosion. The experts of the prosecution drew attention to the mechanical damage. The elements of the tree actually found in the wrecked metal elements. They claimed that the construction was being ripped off by the tree or cracked side alongside the seams. Due to the tension was also shooting off the heads of the rivets. At the end, the birch rips off the elements of the wing mechanization, the so-called steering flange, which is necessary for extending the left steer. The extension of the flight caused by its ripping off, even if momentary, could mean that the plane might have rotated faster to the left. The part is located next to the birch, which is quietly extended with a very characteristic shape of the birch ripper. The moment of its breaking was actually registered in the black box and the flight recorders, which they saw it as managing of the left steer. At the same time, in the register is a fragment of overcompensation. These signals, as the experts say, are quite in time with the birch rip. The fluctuations mean that the birch cut by the wing is only holding on a small part of its beam. It actually crashes down and falls to the right, contrary to the flight axis. In its tree, there are still elements of the actual wing installed. The connections of the girders and the elongated bars, they were actually assembled in the laboratory in one full in the presence of the expert on lake pollution. The long elements of the breakthrough fit into one another as puzzle. It is not a flat cut, which means it wasn't the birch that was cut, but rather the birch cut the wing. In over 10 minutes we managed to analyze the cutting of the wing, which had not even lasted a second, precisely 0.05 seconds. We analyzed only a number of over 20 pieces of evidence located that were gathered, and the proof to the lack of any bomb, assassination, explosion, the proof of numerous collisions with the trees at a very low height. The experts have also checked the way how the airplane was found so low in spite of numerous warnings, numerous communications, and the already known dangers. The strength of the sound. The main conclusions as to the flight come from the unequivocal data as recorded by the equipment, such as the voice recorder.
60, 50, 40, 30, 20.
The readers of the crew with a dropping altitude written in the black boxes was compared with the Polish flight parameter recorder.
I will demonstrate to you now where this registrator is really placed.
The recorder here in the archive photos records data in its digital form, and it was read in Poland. Neither the police, nor the Institute of Forensic Expertise in Krakow, nor other experts have actually doubted the authenticity of the recording of data.
Well, you can see the ground, somehow something is visible, perhaps no tragedy will be there.
Okay, we can see 200.
Pull up, pull up.
That's the last 38 minutes of the flight. Special version for the needs of the experts of the prosecution. The sound was remastered, was recorded again in Moscow and remastered between 2014 and 2015. We got the most clear readout. We read even more words of the crew. A simple example.
It's really the worst thing is you've got this whole clouds and there's fog present.
These were actually the same recordings. The first one at 11 kHz, on which after the clearing of the noise, Krakow Forensic Institute and the Malay Commission worked. The other recording with 96 kHz, as described and cleared off by the prosecutor's experts. That's the 7th minute of the recording. TU is flying over Belarus and it starts to descend. Soon, in the cockpit, the conversational weather starts.
Well, you can see the ground, you can see a bit, perhaps there won't be a tragedy.
The well-known words of the navigator, but after them, for more.
So, we're getting through slowly.
A couple of minutes later, yet another, the Belarusian flight controller from Minsk speaks.
Visibility 400 meters fog.
In the background, the virtually unheard reaction of the crew.
Fuck. What? Well, bloody marvelous. It's our meteor forecast. Well, it's really great.
Here we must take a step back to the takeoff from the military airport in Warsaw-Kętrzyn. The experts have paid attention to the fact that the crew actually left off without the proper weather forecast. They were not given the forecast, which might have indicated a worse meteorological conditions. According to the regulation, the airplane should not have taken off at all. This is the footage from 10th April 2010 from the CCTV of the airport. You can see the last passengers and the late presidential column. According to the custom, the report on the readiness of the flight instead of the commander of the flight is given by the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force, General Błaszczyk. The pilot actually stays behind it. By the experts of the European mentioned this fact, however, seemed not to have commented it. They only remarked a number of places that the takeoff was late by 27 minutes. Let's come back to the flight itself.
When this festivity starts, I don't know, but if we don't land down, the fish will not get out.
The conversation on time, flying out, and the weather.
Well, we'll see. We'll go close and we'll see. We'll come close and we'll see.
In the headpieces of the crew, finally, Korsaj, that is, the controller from Smolensk say.
How much fuel do you have?
Only the commander responds, and the Smolensk controller keeps on asking.
And what's your reserve airfield?
That's yet another moment which the experts of the prosecution mentioned. This day, Saturday, 10th April, Vitebsk was actually closed. In spite of that, the navigator enters Vitebsk into the airplane. According to the maps, the Belarusian airfield was the closest one to Russia and Smolensk. And here the experts characterize the members of the crew. Let's start with the aforementioned navigator. Artur Zięta, the colonel, without the Russian language knowledge, led into the flights in spite of not having had the navigator's Tu-104 navigator rights. His inflow was at only 50 hours. Robert the Major, no Russian, spent 500 hours in the plane, but only 3 flights as the co-pilot. Kolega Michalak, technician, 188 hours in Tupolev. Captain Arkadiusz Prokasik, the commander-in-chief, almost 3,000 hours in Tupolev, 500 hours as commander, but still no flights in the non-precise approach system. The minimum condition for landing, as said in his personal logbook, is 120 meters cloud base versus 1,800 meters visibility. But the actual experts once claimed that falsified. In reality, he could have 600 versus 6,000 meters. So on an airfield such as Smolensk, he could only land with the best of the weather. The conclusion of the experts is that the presidential staff was supposed to have been flying with a different crew, but the initial pilots said they were indisposed. The crew was therefore completed accidentally the day in advance. Suddenly, in the headphones, the crew hears Polish words.
Rafał, on the side, you switch off to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
16 minutes before the disaster, the Polish crew of Jak-40, which was transporting journalists and already at Smolensk, says the conversation with the Jak commander is only run by the second pilot.
Arthur, I'm here. Well, welcome. You know, it's fucked up here. You see about 400 meters around, and the cloud base is much below 50 meters. Much below 50 meters. And have you landed already? Well, we've managed to just from the very last moment. Well, frankly speaking, you can try. They did 2 APMs, but you can try. But if you can't do it at the second time, well, you should go to Moscow or somewhere else.
The experts claim that the suggestion of the Jak commander to undertake a landing attempt in such conditions in the fog
Plane is visible only as an outline.
testifies to the lack of responsibility and actual experience in air flights, especially that the commander of the Jak could see the dangerous landing of the Russian IL-76 before.
It should have been prevented from landing.
These are the TVP photos associated who was then in Smolensk and wanted to record all the landings. The photos were presented by Jerzy Commission.
The entire footage was visible for a minute. It wasn't even a second, just a few frames. There's EL, what was taking for the landing. I just saw an outline. I said 1, 2, 3. You can count for 3, and the plane disappears. The fog is so dense. Well, you could have actually recognized. If you know the planes, you could see that. But such a large plane was visible only for a second. It was just a hole in the fog. Well, I say, how can they land in such conditions?
Let us remind you, the commander-in-chief does not hear the Jak conversation, so he hears no suggestion you may try, but the second pilot does not also give to him exactly. The clouds are way below 50. The commander at the very same time, second channel, talks to the control tower.
You've got fog on Corsage, the visibility of 400 meters.
The commander says that he understood, but he asked about the meteorological conditions again, so the Smolensk controller repeats, first in Russian, and the scope of visibility in English as well.
You've got fog at the Corsage, visibility 400 meters.
Let us stop for a second at the control flight. The experts of the prosecution called upon a number of Russian regulations according to which, with a deteriorating weather, the flight controller from Moscow and then Smolensk should have directed the airplane to the spur airfield. The Smolensk one should have been closed. The commander of the airplane informs the director of the diplomatic protocol of the situation.
Director, there is fog at the moment, and in these conditions we can't land really. Let's try an approach. We do one attempt and probably nothing comes out of it. Well, so please think about an alternative decision what to do then. We will try and try. We don't have that much fuel, so we'll try and try. So we have a problem indeed.
After a couple of minutes, the director of the diplomatic protocol enters the cockpit once again.
So far the president hasn't made up his mind what to do then.
The crew is suspended. They have to decide for their own. The piloting of the Tu-154 is only a thing for the leader, and only he knows Russian. So at the same time, whilst piloting, he has to have the conversation running.
Paka means now, so far.
Which is even worse, the door of the cockpit is not closed entirely. Every now and then somebody takes a glimpse inside.
Captain, I ask, there is an ensign retired from Riga, ask for permission. Can I listen to it too?
The Russian flight controller, instead of closing the airfield, agrees for an attempt landing, and 6 minutes before the crash reminds the Polish crew.
101 from 100 meters, be ready to depart for the second circle.
4 minutes before the crash, the Jak-40 sends from the ground the last warning.
Arek, now you can see only 200.
200 meters visibility, that is way below the minimum conditions for landing. Of the airfield, of the airplane, of the pilot, but still they fly on.
The last line.
At the last line of the airplane, we set off almost 10 kilometers from the threshold of the airfield, almost immediately go down into the fog. They are reading the so-called card at the time.
Wing mechanization, interceptors, reflectors, hit and lit.
They check the settings of the machine before the landings and began the approach procedure too late. First of all, they go outside of the path on its left. Second of all, they are too high, over 8 kilometers. They are 500 meters over the ground and as many as 100 meters below the actual approach line. In the meantime, the Russian controller takes a mistaken decision.
You are on path, on course.
The smaller precipices, they are yet another worse than from the ground.
Runway free. On path, on course.
Let's state here the Russians were bringing Tupolev down according to such an imprecise system of approach landing. But the airplane had a single radar controlling the altitude, was a flat vertical echo, and a second controlling it was a flat green echo. Only according to the Polish experts, the screens of the Russian controllers had a much worse outlook. Due to the non-cut trees, probably the radars had not seen the Tupolev at all when it was on a low ceiling.
Are you afraid of something? You don't want to talk with journalists?
That's an attempt to talk with Pavel Pruskin, the Russian flight controller, who on April 10th to get Wilzhenko control the Tupolev.
All questions please ask to the investigating committee. Are you responsible? You feel responsible for what happened? I'm terribly sorry it happened, but I did everything possible to prevent it from happening.
Let us add that the work of the flight controller on April 10th should have been recorded in the video mode, so that only the tape seems to have been stuck. On top of that, part of the reflectors and lights were either not working or covered up by trees and bushes. A couple of hours after the catastrophe, the Russians were exchanging the bulbs in the defunct reflectors, but the crew should have known they are flying at an closed airfield, opened only for the cutting celebrations. 5 kilometers away from the threshold, the Tupolev is as many as 132 meters sideways from the right path and is only starting to approach it. It is exactly then that for the first time the actual terrain ahead alarm goes off. The airplane is 300 meters above the airfield level, still above the actual path of approach. The machine needs to lower its field, but it's going on the auto mode.
In case of unsuccessful attempt, we're going autopilot.
The pilot has set the airspeed at 280 kilometers per hour, so when he starts descending, the machine, in order to equalize the speed, automatically decreases the strength of the engines from only 50% to only 32% output. That is actually forbidden. In contrast with the instruction of the US, the low RPMs of the engines and the lack of power is a key thing to that failed attempt for a second go. But none of the crew, even the technician, actually pays any attention to the output. The final countdown begins.
400 meters. Somebody's at fault here. You say goodbye? No, somebody will be punished for that. Ideas?
At the headphones of the pilots, you can still hear the warnings: terrain ahead and pull up. But the Russian controller of the flight is still giving mistaken
On
information.
course, on path.
The airplane descends too fast, even 9 meters per second. It is as if with every second it were 2-3 floors below. In the cockpit, there's a sideways person. According to some experts, it could have been the commander of the Air Force. It is only him of the passenger that could actually be reading the altitude properly and trying to tell the pilots to land.
Well, you'll fit. Go on. 230 meters, 250.
According to the experts, if they actually wanted to fly off for a second go, not land, that was the place they should equal it, but they were still going below. The engines running at only 30% capacity. Soon they will have passed the border 75 meters below the airfield level. According to it, that was the last moment for them to ever take a secure second go. Instead of flying off, they keep descending. The navigator is using the improper altitude meter, radio altitude meter, which means that instead of reading the altitude to the airfield level, it is reading it to the ground level.
200.
And the terrain is lowering. The airplane flies into a deep gorge. The subsequently read altitude seems to get
28
around
seconds
the
to
level.
the crash. 150. 100 meters. 100. 90 meters, 80 meters, we're leaving 60 meters, 50 meters, 40 meters, 30, 20.
The pilots could have taken a second go before, just as in the film from the experiment of the Miller Commission, manually increasing the output of the engines, or even, as the experts of the Prosecutor checked, they could have actually set off in the auto mode, but under a certain precondition. If they had set the machinery properly, it was enough to pull this button to ascend quickly. We don't know whether the pilot pressed it, but we know that the navigation devices were not properly set for such a mode of second go, because the properly set go in the auto mode would have been noted by the black boxes.
Not ready for takeoff.
The navigator reads 40, 30, and he shouts 20 meters above the ground.
40, 30, 20.
The airplane is flying in dense fog. The crew doesn't even know where they are. The airplane is a mere 20 meters above the ground and 6 meters below the level of the airfield. Not a single element of the descending airplane is above the airfield level, which additionally is 60 meters to the right. Soon the right wing hits the first obstacle.
20.
It is only then that the commander actually pulls up after a second, increasing the output at the same time, pushing this away to 12 degrees, which the experts have read as the willingness to jump over the lower altitude and an attempt to land. The commander maximally pulls it off after they hit the first obstacle. All the flight recorders and black boxes indicate a very low altitude. The airplane cuts subsequent trees, slowly ascending, but according with it, the level of the ground also rises for 3 seconds at merely 6 meters altitude. Right before the major birch, it hits a flock of trees, and it is here also loses small fragments of the fuselage. So it is about to hit the car with the low tree. The airplane engines actually booming in the register first show the vibration in the right and in the left engine, and it is in this place when the subcommissioner of Macierewicz sees the explosion.
The tragedy took place due to two explosions. There was an explosion. We know about 3. We're talking about an explosion of explosive device, not fuel. You need to realize this is an act of war. It wasn't an accident, it was an assassination attempt.
According to the experts' opinion that we've been trying to describe with this infographic, the majority of the elements were bent inside the wings. The actual girders and the hydraulic elements were bending around the birch. The rubber elements, such as the sealing gaskets and pace, as well as the cables, bear no signs of explosion. We've already discussed it all.
The aircraft is accelerating to a takeoff speed. The high impact speed
The ripped-off tip of the wing behaves exactly as in this US movie from the crash impact of Lockheed Constellation test. It is by spinning motion it goes upwards and follows the airplane. The experts of the prosecution also noticed this movie. The trees behind the bodyland behind the tree are actually cut under degree of 16 degrees. The engines are at their 50% of output. The airplane ascends. The laws of aerodynamics mean that the right undamaged wing actually tilts the airplane higher than the left one, hence the machine begins to revolve. Such the behavior of the Tu-154 was compared and affirmed by the military university at the 90 degrees. It falls into the tiny forest in front of Kutuzowa Street. Radio altimeter starts to show data which is incredible. First 18 meters, 60 meters later 37 meters. Most probably it is only showing the distance to the nearest trees to the right of the flight path. The airplane cuts these power lines. The time of grid outage is consequent with the time of the catastrophe. On this particular pine and this particular birch it loses yet another element of its wings. It loses the slots and the flaps as well as a small part of the rear steering wheel. The hit is so strong and actually rips off pieces of wood, transporting it dozens of meters further towards the salon. Next to its fins, actually a flap was found which was hanging on the wheel in the place where the wing was cut by the tree. The left engine reaches maximum vibration. The experts claim it actually sucked in birches or even parts of the construction of aluminium. It is from this place, the experts claim, the left wing pulls after it a hurl of flame. The experts of the prosecution, backing over numerous photos, show the torn-off elements of the spinster, the elements of the cut by the actual rotor blades spewed forth behind the tail of the airplane. Here you can see the photo from the inside of an incineration chamber. You can see the cut fragments of aluminium, as well as pieces of torn branches. Right before Kutuzowa Street, right next to the car dealer, as the airplane hits two trees. It cuts one with the already damaged wing and a part of its tail. The branch of the second is cut only by its tail, hence losing the major part of it. The airplane is tilted to the left at 116 degrees. It is approximately 22 meters above the ground. It will soon start descending. Here, the credible recording of the Polish flight recorder ends. Let's come back to Sławomir Wiśniewski, the employee of TVP, who, from the hotel window next to the hotel, first recorded the landing of IL-76.
The plane is visible on an outline. I heard this very strange, unnatural sound of the engine. The increase of the power. The engines were yelling, were torturing, looked more like a takeoff than a landing. The plane was having its left wing downwards, about 60-70 degrees, and there was a question, how do you know it was the left wing, not the right wing? Well, logic indicates that if it were the right wing, I would see the fuselage.
Wiśniewski a couple of years ago was in the same listening by Antoni Macierewicz.
Some say that this crash at the background was some shooting, some explosion, something happened, something similar, nothing like that.
It was him as the first Pole that was present in the place of the disaster, and he recorded the still burning fuel and the wreckage. We can only show this footage.
Definitely, there was no explosion. I never heard any explosion. But if I heard an explosion, I would be much more frightened. Apart from this explosion after the crash, apart from the explosion which was after the crash.
Where the damage came from? The experts claim that numerous obstacles are guilty and the tilted gears up position of the airplane. It is well worth seeing and comparing these satellite photos of the surroundings of Smolensk before and after the crash. What part of the forest disappeared on April 10th, mowed down by the Polish airplane. The destruction begins from hitting the left damage wing into the ground at an angle of 140 degrees. The experts say that discharged part of the energy impact. The left wing cuts a ditch of the width of 2 meters and 1 to 1.5 meter deep. The wing then spins off the construction, according to the experts, opening the central fuel and also the remains of the left part of the wings and the cockpit. Crashes yet another ditch in the land. These are the deep ditches and the elements of the left wing found at the bottom of it, identified at the names. Here the actual power goes out, and as the GPS data shows, as recorded by the airplane mechanically, here the recording of the local FMS computer also stops. The elements of the central wing ripped off the airplane construction are lying dozens of meters away, according with the line to which the car was dropping. Scorched by the fire after the fuel ignited, around them you can see the scorched grass. In reality, it lasts a couple of seconds.
40, 30, 20.
If the visualization of the sound amplitude was to be exemplified with the obstacles, the most noise is when the airplane hits the obstacle.
20. Bushes, birch.
You can't hear the explosion, only a couple of seconds shout until the very end. We decided not to publish it here. The strongest part of the airplane, the weight of the fuselage and of the gears, 9 tons of fuel, actually tears to pieces the top of the airplane, which is scattered with the trees. It is only 2 millimeters thick. Which is interesting, in the wreckage the experts find the left door in the ground. According to Maciewicz people, that's the effect of the explosion. The door was supposedly to have been shot away by the blast. A year ago, the subcommission showed it in the film.
The door must have had additional source of energy to increase its impetus.
Only that the subcommission fails to show in the broader show that the side of the airplane from which the explosion allegedly shot the door off is right next to them, also smashed into the ground. If it were an explosion in the air, the side with an empty doorway and the door itself would be in different places. According to the experts of the prosecution, it is here that after the crash, the collision with the earth, the construction was broken and the door ripped off. Under the experts' opinion, over 20 experts signed. Here in the photos of 2010, during the Smolensk conversation, the head Antoni Milkiewicz, who over 30 years ago investigated the IL-62 catastrophe in Warsaw, and was not afraid during the communist time to blame the Russian technicians for the disaster. Now Milkiewicz and his men say Smolensk is an ordinary air catastrophe. For their opinion, under which they signed, they take full responsibility. They know that the possible mistakes could mean their life in prison. Piotr Świerczek, TVN24.
The power of facts against theories, lacking proofs. 8 years after the crash in Smolensk. That's what we show today, black on white. Stay with us tomorrow, the same time. Good night.